folks, this is Foxy here again, your hostess with the mostest, and welcome to a very nostalgic episode of FoxxTales, where I talk a little bit about one of my problematic faves, old-time radio.
The Grape Nuts Flakes program, starring Jack Benny, with Mary Livingston, Phil Harris, Dennis Day Rochester, and yours truly, Don Wilson.
One of my grandmothers has been on the decline for a while now and had to be moved to a care home. So my dad was recently going through her bookshelves to send them off to recycling. Of course, he asks me if I want anything, and among these items was this really interesting collection, which I mistook for a book at first because I clearly need to pay more attention to the things right in front of my face. Anyhow, this is a collection of audio cassette tapes containing a selection of the 60 greatest old-time radio shows of the 20th century. According to the 20th century's most trusted man in America, former CBS broadcaster and mustache aficionado, Walter Cronkite. It's a really neat collection of historical popular media. Whoop. I've listened to most of these episodes at one time or another, and some of them hold up really well. The Mercury Radio Theater Presents adaptation of H.G. Wells' For the War of the Worlds is a masterpiece in storytelling, and easily one of my favorite pieces of media of all time, in spite of its flaws. There's definitely some problematic stuff in there. There's also Three Skeleton Key. It's a great man versus nature horror story starring Vincent Price. Many of them, however, I dare say most of them, are soups cringe by the standards of today, and that's what we're going to chat about. Okay. So, I guess we should start with what is old-time radio, or OTR, and how did this become a special interest of mine? The golden age of radio began in the mid-1920s as the novel new technology of wireless audio broadcasting began to find consumer success, and broadcast networks sprang up to foster the growth of commercial broadcasting. In 1925, 19% of American homes owned a radio, a number that exploded to 83% by 1940. According to these censuses that I looked at, there was a huge and unsurprising disparity in radio ownership between whites and people of color. Fewer than half of the POC respondents had radio sets in their homes, and the first program to hit syndication was essentially a minstrel show. So, problematic. The prominence of radio waned in the 1950s as television took over. Many of the more successful shows and personalities attempted to make the leap to TV. Some of them made it, some of them didn't. The writers and producers definitely made the transition, taking the lessons they learned from scripted radio and applying it to the new medium. The roots of television as an art form evolved from the airwaves, and as a media junkie, I ate it up. I first got into old-time radio, or OTR, when I was probably 8 years old or something like that. I'd stay up way past my bedtime reading and listening to a couple of shows by legendary Vancouver radio personality Jack Cullen in the twilight of his career. The Owl Prowl from 10 p.m. till midnight, playing swing and big band, and then Network Replay from midnight till 3 a.m., which was these old-time radio programs. Westerns, dramas, comedies, sci-fi, adventure, lots of adaptations of classic lit or short stories like Sherlock Holmes or Joseph Conrad. I fell asleep to this stuff every night for years. Yes, I was a strange child. Over time, it became a significant interest. One of my grade 12/senior year writing projects was a parody of Sam Spade detective named Trevor Trowell. It was, well, fine, but I'm kind of glad it's lost to the ages. Anyhow, I kind of grew out of it and I moved on to other things to fall asleep to. At one point, it was specific chapters of the Harry Potter audiobooks that Nex had pirated. More on that in a second. But every now and then, I'd have a bout of nostalgia and revisit this fascinating time capsule. The last time I really did that was during the COVID lockdowns, and quickly learned that it was hard to listen to any but the most milquetoast comedies and some of the sci-fi drama horror. The westerns, adventure, and crime genres are so full of harmful cultural stereotypes, misogyny, settler colonial valorization, and outright racism that they're not really worth the time outside of historical study. Even some of my favorites have multiple episodes I can't listen to because they are problematic. Like the Jack Benny program's Minstrel episode. More on him in a second. Okay, so what do you do when you have a special interest in problematic media? Definitely don't make partners deal with your weird hobbies when they're trying to put it to sleep. Oh, where was I? Oh, right. Problematic media. The best thing we can do when we become aware of the issues within a comforting hyperfixation is to change how we engage with it and relate to it. That doesn't necessarily mean we have to cut it out altogether, but to learn to assess media critically, understand its place in the relevant cultural milieu, and not indelibly attach your personal identity to a cultural phenomenon. Right, so, Jack Benny. He was a massively influential comedian who pioneered the situational comedy format and successfully took his show from radio to television. In my opinion, lots of the Jack Benny program episodes are still humorous, and as a historical record, it's super interesting to track popular American culture through the lens of a topical, episodic comedy show that was on the air in one form or another for nearly 30 years and over 900 episodes. The Simpsons is probably the closest thing we have to that kind of longevity, a show that shared its Sunday evening spot. But the contexts are so different that it's hard to directly compare them. Anyhow, this is not a deep dive video, so to make my point, in the same way that The Simpsons has some classic episodes that are funny 30 years later, and some that are kind of cringe in retrospect, the Jack Benny program has some enduringly funny episodes, along with some wild stuff, like Jack asking Americans to pray for Uncle Joe during several of his New Year's broadcasts during the Second World War, and no, not Joe Biden. He's not that old. Joe Stalin. It also has lots of problematic depictions of minorities and queer people. The show made proactive strides to change those depictions over its long run, and that's one of the things that draws me in as a historian. It's a story about stories. When you learn that Jack Benny was born Benjamin Kubelski, had to obscure his Jewish heritage to succeed in show business, satirized Nazis, was friends with Ronald Reagan, and appeared in drag so often that it raises some questions, you get a broader picture of the complex nature of oppression within our media landscape. Taking a step back to both appreciate and also critique the stories that have shaped us is crucial to engaging with media that has a problematic legacy. That can be easier said than done. The more relevant media is to the current zeitgeist, the tougher it can be to let go. It's really easy for me to critique a show that very few people of my generation have heard of, let alone experienced. But the second the critique lands on contemporary media, people are much more emotionally attached to something they have a relationship with. Like Harry Potter. I used to enjoy the series, in spite of its flaws and shoddy world building, especially the audiobook chapters where Harry makes the transition to the magical world in the first 4 books. Perfectly dreamlike and sleep-inducing. It wasn't something I ever came close to building an identity around, but it was still a big letdown to discover J.K. Rowling's true colors, and her crusade against trans people made it impossible for me to maintain a relationship with that media. That's the danger of attaching a core part of your identity to a media property that you have zero control over. One day, you're scampering around a field playing Quidditch and swapping fan-made recipes for butterbeer. The next, you're being told by the writer you idolize that continued support of the media you have attached yourself to is directly contributing to a political campaign against transgender people. The best way to avoid being manipulated into such an ethical quandary is to try to avoid attaching yourself so deeply in the first place. Read critically. Enjoy things for what they are without attachment. Learn from their successes and failures and begin to create your own art. That can be really hard for people with hyperfixations and intense special interests. I get that. I have been there. But it's also a good practice to cultivate because you get to be the author of your own story instead of being defined by the stories you consume. I'll always find old-time radio fascinating in a historical sense, and I'll even revisit it occasionally in a bout of nostalgia or for projects like this one. But I'm also content with letting go of stories that no longer serve me. Anyhow, I've found yet another piece of media to make a part of my bedtime routine that is in no way problematic. Hey folks, thanks for watching FoxxTales. If you enjoyed this video, can you give me a like and subscribe to my channel so that I can continue making more content like this that you will enjoy? On my channel, you're going to find stuff like this: historical essays and media topics, contemporary essays and media topics, writing tips, production tips, fun, artsy, creative-y stuff. I also have updates for all of my other artistic projects that are not necessarily directly related to FoxxTales. My big announcement is that we're soon going to be having a new book that I'm publishing through my publishing company, Anomalous Transmissions, which is a horror anthology called Slasher Fic Gothic. Comes out in the middle of Spooktober, so keep your eyes peeled. It's going to be updates in this space and all over social media. You can find the links to my content socials down there. I've written a really cool vampire story for it. I'm very excited. I've also been working on the rest of the stories with the other writers, and so excited to share it. It's going to be so good. If you want to help support my work, the best way to do that is either dropping some money in my tip jar, coffee.com/FoxxTales, or becoming a patron like one of these lovely folks so you can support me on a more consistent basis. Patrons get access to all sorts of things like early copies of the stories that I'm working on, my screenplays that have not been produced yet, behind the scenes stuff, regular newsletter, which is now free. If you want to go to the Patreon and just look at the newsletter, you can do that. Talk about what I'm working on, what I've been watching, and what I think about it. And there's going to be some writing tips in there in the future. All of that goes a long way to helping me be a full-time creator, which is really what I want to do. Again, you can find everything in the description of this video. I hope to see you around FoxxTales again soon, and have a lovely night. Day, morning, wherever it is, whenever you are.